I don't usually believe in ghost stories. I've always thought of them as exaggerated tales people use to scare themselves for fun. But after what happened to me last winter, I don't laugh at those stories anymore. I lived through something I still can't explain, and I'm not sure I ever want to. It started when I needed a place to stay for a couple of months. I had just quit my job in the city after a nasty burnout and wanted somewhere quiet and cheap to rest, preferably far from people. A friend of my uncle's had this old house in a rural area, about 4 hours from town. It wasn't listed anywhere online. It was one of those places that just existed, tucked deep in the woods with no neighbors in sight. The man offered to let me stay there for free, just pay the electricity and keep the place clean. I thought I was lucky. When I arrived, it was already evening. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting long, crooked shadows across the dirt driveway. The house was 2 stories tall, made of worn wood and brick, and looked like it hadn't been lived in for years. The front porch sagged a little in the middle. One of the windows on the second floor was cracked. There was a strange smell in the air, like damp wood and something older. Inside, the house was surprisingly furnished. Old couches, dusty shelves, a grandfather clock that didn't work anymore, and paintings that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. One painting in particular gave me chills. A woman standing in the woods, her face turned away from the viewer. Still, it was quiet, peaceful even. I unpacked, settled into the bedroom upstairs, and tried to get used to the creaking of the floors and the distant hoots of owls. The first night passed uneventfully, but on the second night, I heard it. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, creaking steps, like someone walking barefoot across the wooden floor downstairs. I froze in bed, holding my breath. I told myself it was the house settling. Old places make noises. But these steps didn't sound random. They were in a pattern. 4 steps, pause, then 4 more, then silence. I stayed awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, waiting to hear it again, but it didn't return. The next morning, I laughed it off. Probably a raccoon or a tree branch brushing the roof. I made coffee, opened a window to let in some fresh air, and tried to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That's when I noticed something odd. On the wall near the stairs, there was a handprint. A small, child-sized handprint in the dust. But I hadn't touched that wall, and I was alone. I stared at the handprint for a long time. It was small, almost like a child's, and perfectly formed in the layer of dust. 5 tiny fingers spread wide, like whoever left it had pressed their hand there deliberately. I took a photo of it with my phone just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the handprint had always been there and I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe someone had visited the house recently. Maybe. A lot of maybes. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. That night, I made sure all the windows and doors were locked. I even blocked the front door with a chair, like I'd seen in movies. It was childish, but it made me feel a little safer. At exactly 2 a.m., the sound returned. Footsteps. This time they were louder, not slow and creeping like before, more like pacing. Back and forth, directly beneath my room. I lay in bed, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling, as if it might crack open and reveal whatever was down there. Then came the whispering. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard it clearly, multiple voices, hushed and urgent, like two people arguing right outside my bedroom door. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone, angry, desperate. I gathered every ounce of courage I had, grabbed a flashlight, and opened the bedroom door. Silence. The hallway was empty. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on my skin. I tiptoed down the stairs, every creak of the steps echoing like thunder. When I reached the living room, the temperature dropped. My breath came out in a white mist. And then I saw it. The painting, the one with the woman in the woods, was different. She wasn't facing away anymore. Now she was staring directly at me. Her eyes were wide, empty, and full of hate. Her mouth was slightly open, like she was about to speak. I don't know how I didn't scream. I ran back upstairs, locked the door, and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I rushed downstairs to check the painting again. It was back to normal. The woman's back was turned just like before. I even checked the photo I took of it earlier. It hadn't changed. But I saw her face. I know I did. That was the day I decided to leave. I packed my bags, called a cab company from the nearest town, and told them to pick me up at the end of the long dirt road. I didn't care how much it cost. I just wanted out. But I never made it out of that house, because that night was the worst one yet. I barely moved all day. I kept the lights on, the doors locked, and my phone in my hand. I didn't eat. I didn't even speak. I just waited. I knew the cab would come in the morning. I just had to survive one more night. As night fell, the house seemed to shift. The shadows grew darker. The silence grew heavier. Every creak, every gust of wind felt like a warning. I stayed in my room, fully dressed, sitting on the bed with my flashlight clutched tight in my hand. At exactly 2 a.m., the footsteps started again, but this time they weren't downstairs. They were right outside my bedroom door, slow, heavy, dragging. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps, like a child asking to come in. I didn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then the whisper came again, but this time I understood it. A girl's voice. She said, "He's here. He found you." The doorknob rattled. I backed away, heart hammering, flashlight beam shaking. I was about to scream when I heard the creak, the sound of the attic hatch above me sliding open. I looked up, and something fell from the ceiling. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even fully human. Pale limbs, twisted joints, black, empty eyes that reflected no light. It dropped to the floor like a puppet with cut strings, and then began to crawl toward me. I ran. I didn't care about the bag, the cab, anything. I tore down the stairs, slammed open the front door, and froze. The woods were full of them. Figures, pale, hunched, unmoving, dozens of them, just standing there in the trees, watching the house, watching me. And in the middle of them was the woman from the painting. She didn't speak. She just lifted her hand and pointed back toward the house. Suddenly, I was yanked backward. Something grabbed me, cold, strong hands, and dragged me back inside. The door slammed shut on its own. The lights went out, and I knew then I was never supposed to leave. I was found 3 days later, curled up in the basement, muttering to myself. The cab driver had called the police when I didn't show up. They said I was lucky to be alive, but I don't feel lucky, because every night since I left that house at exactly 2 a.m., I hear the knocking, and now it's inside my home.